In this video, we're going to work on customizing the art for the player character and the NPCs in our dialogue system sample scene here. So what I'm starting from is just, if you were to go to GitHub and find the dialogue system third person sample that I made and either clone it or just download the zip and then open the project, there's a scene inside called Test Dialogue System. And I'll put this URL in the video description so it's easier to find. Anyway, open up the Test Dialogue System scene and it'll look something like this when you run it. We have down here in the bottom, we have this character that I got from Mixamo, and the arrow keys, horizontal, left and right, orbit the camera, and up and down move forward and backwards, and then shift sprints. And if we walk up to the NPC here and hit spacebar, we can talk to him. So this is basically just replaced the default character controller that Dialogue System was using with a slightly customized one and with a different character model. So I'm going to show you how to change the artwork to use a different character from Mixamo for your player character, and then also how to create your own NPCs to talk to as well. So let's head over to Mixamo and just find a new character. I was wanting to do something with one of these ladies with the bow and arrow. Let's see what's going on. I guess my login expired here. I'm just gonna pause the video while I log in. Okay, so here we are at Mixamo, and I was gonna check out some characters and find somebody to use. And basically I wanted a more threatening character for my NPC, and I wanted this nerdy guy for my player character. So I'll start off by downloading this lady who's equipped with a bow and arrow. And so we will download the character, and we want to choose FBX for Unity, and T-pose is fine. So let's go ahead and download it. Okay, so now that I see where the FBX is, I'm going to find my Unity project, and I have a folder in here for models, and this is where I'm going to drag the FBX into. So if I go back to Chrome and I show this in Windows Explorer, I can then drag the file that I downloaded, into this models directory to keep my project organized. And you can see there's an issue with Mixamo and Unity. I can drag this character in, and it's like it's missing textures seemingly, but this is relatively easy to fix. We just have to do a couple of steps. So if I find the character that the model that we just dragged into our Unity project here, and I look at its import settings in the inspector. So if you click on the actual file in the project window, you should be able to see the settings in the inspector here. And we want to look at the materials, and we need to, let's see if I can remember how this works. So there's kind of two steps to this. First step is to extract the textures. I've actually seen it work skipping this step and going straight to this step. I don't know. We'll just go with the full process, although it'd be interesting to test the more streamlined option. But anyway, let's just go into this textures directory that I've already made, and this is where we're extracting the textures into. So we want to keep the project organized. So I don't know, what is this character is called a Kai. So I'm going to make a new folder inside of this textures folder I already have named after the character. and I'll open that and just extract the textures into that. And that actually seems to have mainly fixed it. But let's say that doesn't fix it for you. I'll show you what I had to do with this Remy character to get it to work. I had to also extract the materials. So I have to have the model selected here in the project window. And then I go to extract materials, and inside my assets directory, all of your Unity stuff should be inside the assets directory. So in here I have a folder called materials. I'll make another folder for this character, because if I just were to put all of the materials for everything in this folder without any subfolders, it would get kind of confusing. So we're going to organize it into subfolders, and we will extract all of the Akai materials into this Akai folder I just made. And so to get Remy to work, which was just another character I picked from Mixamo, what I had to do is then find all of those materials, which is actually just one in this case, and I had to change the shader. So if you look at Remy, since this one's working, I'm not going to bother changing it. But if we were to look at Remy, you can see Remy had several materials. So what I did was I selected them all, and by default they were just using the standard shader, kind of like the Akai material here is using standard. I should note that if you're trying to do this on the lightweight render pipeline or any of the scriptable render pipelines, this is probably a whole different process. But anyway, for the 3D with extras template, which is what this project was using, the standard shader is what is going to be selected by default, and that didn't work on Remy. So what I had to do is select all of Remy's materials here and change it to legacy / bumped specular, and that fixed it. So and you'll know you have the issue where it's like it kind of looks like it's working, but you can see through Remy's face and you can see his eyeballs and stuff. He kind of looks like inside out or something. That's when you need to extract the materials and change the shader off of standard into one of these legacy bumped speculars, what worked for me. But in this case, I didn't even have to do that step. So hopefully you pick one where you can not even have to worry about that, and just extracting the textures alone will fix it. All right, so I've got the character. If I run the game now, she's just going to be in the T-pose. So yeah, and I can walk through her because she has no collider. She's literally just a model right now. So no collision, no gameplay, nothing. And so what we need to do is make that model work similarly to this NPC setup we have here. And so what I think the smart way to do this is to just look at what's on this guy, private heart in the inspector, and basically copy the components that I know we need to get our dialogue system set up working, and add them to this game object, the Akai model here. And I guess before we do that though, why don't we let's go ahead and find a different animation besides the T-pose. So what I'm going to do is go back to Mixamo, and this time I'm going to look at animations. And I just need like some kind of idle animation. So I'm just going to type in idle and see what we see here. I kind of like this one where she's kind of like bored looking. That's one option. I don't know. Pick whatever you like, but I'll just go with this one. It might loop a little fast for me, so maybe if I take this overdrive, I think this basically just adjusts the speed of the animation. I'm not sure. Let's try putting it way down. Yeah, that seems slower, and if I were to put it all the way up, it's faster, right? So let's put this down, just because I don't want it to like get done too fast. or it might kind of loop too quickly. I guess what I could do if I really wanted to be fancy is I could have this idle and then it could go into a different idle that's just standing. In fact, maybe it's safer to just pick a different idle that's just standing. Anyway, I don't mean to get wrapped up too much into the details of how to make this look good. I just want to pick an animation and show you how to get it in the game. So anyway, you've got your character, you've chosen an animation, and now we're going to hit download. And again, we want to make sure it's on FBX for Unity, and we want to go ahead and do it without the skin because we already have our model in there. And so essentially we're just downloading this animation in theory. So I'm going to download that. And so let's go find our Unity project, and I have an animations folder here. We can go ahead and right click in there and create a new folder for this new character, which was Akai, I think was her name. And so I'll open that up, and this is where I want to drag in this new animation. So you can see it's the name of the character at animation name. So if I hit show in folder, that'll come up. It's on a different monitor for me, but it'll come up in Windows Explorer, and you can just drag it in. And so there is her idle animation. And so I'm gonna see if you can see it says no models available for preview. Please drag a model into this preview area. There's like all these different tabs on here. Well, we're going to try and look at the animation tab. So what I can do is find our Akai model. Well, that's the material. Whoops. Here's the model. And so let's see what happens if we drag this model into this preview area. And in theory, we should be able to see if we hit play, the animation playing on the model. And it's pretty subtle, so you may not notice it, but it is animating here. All right, so I know it can work because I see it working in this preview. The next step is going to be to, I don't know if I need to hit apply here. I guess I did. Anyway, I just hit apply. Otherwise, if you need to hit apply and you don't and you click off, it'll tell you need to hit apply. So if you see that, just hit yes. Anyway, next step is we have to tell her to play that animation. So right now, if we hit play, it's she's not animating, right? So you can look and see she's not playing that animation. So when we look at her in the hierarchy here, you see that she does have an animator already, but there's no animation controller on it. So let's go ahead and make one. So I go back into my animations directory. You can kind of see how I did it with Remy. I put his animation controller in here with all of his animations. So let's kind of do that same pattern with this Akai character. We have an idle. I need to make an animation controller for it. So I'm just going to right click in empty space and go to the create menu and look for animation controller. So there it is. And I'm just going to name this, I can't remember if I used a capital or not in the other one, but we'll just wing it. Akai animation controller. Let's just see how I named Remy. That's cool. I just want to follow the same naming pattern so that it makes sense. All right, so I got lucky guessing what I did last time. And now we're just going to click on the new character here and be careful that you can see like this character, it's actually composed of a few different things, right? So when you click on it, we want to make sure we have the base top level root of the object selected here. And otherwise, if you like select part of the model and not the top root object, you'll see there's no animator on this like sub object. So make sure you click the top parent of this object, and that's where the animator is. And if there wasn't an animator there, you could add one, animator with an OR as opposed to animator or animation. Anyway, but we already have one. So I'm just going to drag the animation controller in there. Okay. Once I have that in there, I can double click it and see what's going on with it. So right now, this is kind of like a flowchart system, and it might make more sense just to show you how Remy is set up. So let's click on Remy. So as soon as the game loads, or the scene with Remy in it loads, he moves into his idle pose. And you can see then he has a way to transition from idle into walking backwards, and from walking backwards back into idle, and he has a way to transition from idle into running, and from running into sprint, and then back to running and back to idle. So that's how Remy is set up. Explaining all of this is out of the scope of this video. I just want to show you how to get an idle set up. So it's easy. Basically, we just need this part right here. And so what I'm going to do is go back to my Akai animation controller, and I'm going to actually, what you can do is just drag this animation in here, and we have an idle pose. So actually that basically might be all we need, really. We'll have to see if the animation is set up to loop. So if I guess what we could do is just run the game and see what happens, but it might be hard to tell if she's looping or not. But we can see that she did immediately go into that idle animation. It might be harder to tell if it's looping. So let's see if it, see it froze. So it played the animation once and then it froze. Anyhow, so in order to fix that, I'll stop the game. And I'm going to actually click on this animation itself here. So our animation controller, that's all it took. I just had to drag the state in there. I dragged the new animation in here and it created a state for it. This is just like a flowchart view of a state machine. So as soon as the game starts, it goes into the idle state. And there's no transitions or anything I need to set up right now. So it's basically done. But I need to change the animation itself to set it up to loop. So click on the animation here in the project window. So assets, animations, Akai, and then there's the idle. And in order to get it to loop, we're going to click on the animation tab here. And we're going to look for something called loop time. Here it is right here. So we'll just check it. And actually, I think that's all it's going to take. Now remember, you have to hit apply, but I'll show you if I don't hit apply and I click off of it, it will say, are you sure you don't want to apply? And actually, yes, I do want to apply. And so it's easy to remember to apply that way. Now, let's run the game again and see if the animation loops. And actually, if I were to drag the animator window, maybe I can't drag it while it's running. There we go. And I click on Akai here. You can see the blue bar is the progress of the animation. I just moved the animator window down here so I can see the editor and the animation view here. And you can see she's animating, and when it hits the end, it's looping now instead of just stopping. All right, so visually it's okay. We just need the functionality of walking up to the character, pressing spacebar, and talking. So like I mentioned, I'm going to click on this character, Private Heart, and essentially copy the components that are needed for that and paste them onto her. So what I guess I'm just going to tell you what we need. We need this one that says usable. So I'm on Private Heart, this guy. I'm going to find the usable script here, usable script. Right click on the name itself where it's in bold print. That's just the part you have to right click if you want to copy a component. And I'm going to hit copy component. Then I'm going to go back to my Akai character here in the hierarchy. And here is her. Once Akai is selected, I can see her components. Right now there is no usable. So again, it's kind of awkward. You'd think maybe you could right click here, but that doesn't work. If you right click on any of the existing component names, so I'll just do the last one here, animator. I'm going to right click on the name of that component. and I'm going to hit paste component as new, and that will paste in the component that we had copied earlier. Okay, so we've got that one. Let's go back to private heart, and the next thing I need here is this dialogue system trigger. And you can kind of see like from here to here is just basic stuff for a character. We have our basic character, so we're going to focus on after the animator. So we have usable, and then we have dialogue system trigger. So I'm going to right click on that component's name, copy component. I'm going to go back to the Akai character, right click on the last component that I had, and hit paste component as new. And remember, it's kind of awkward. You have to click on the name. If you click over here, it doesn't do anything, and it's right click. So you right click on the name, paste component as new. All these components are collapsible, so don't be tricked by that. If you can just expand and collapse these at your own convenience to make things easier to see. Okay, let's go back to private heart. What else we got on them here? We have a sphere collider. This is what we need. You can see it's marked as a trigger. This is what we need for our player to know that they are in the radius or the range that's okay to interact with the character. So in other words, I'll just show you. If we look at private heart here, you can see there's two colliders. There's this larger outer sphere, and this is the one that's right here. You can see if I uncheck it, it kind of turns off a little, although you can still kind of see it. Anyway, trust me, this one is this one, and you can see it's marked as a trigger, which means it's not going to block you when you walk into it. You can pass right through it. However, the trigger will detect that you're inside of it, and that's what dialogue system needs to understand when you can and cannot talk to this character. So I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to hit copy component. I'm going to go back to my Akai character, find my last component here, right click on the name, and choose paste component as new, and there we have the sphere collider. So if I double click on Akai in the hierarchy here, you can see now she has the collider. Now, technically, the player can be anywhere in this sphere and interact with the character, and you may like it like that, or you may need the player to actually be in front of the character to make it look right for your cutscenes and stuff. So if I wanted to make the player be in front of her in order to interact with her, what I would need to do is probably adjust where the circle is and how large it is relative to her. So what I could do, if I wanted to move it forward, that would be on the Z. So I could just put a 1 here, and that would mean I have to be right around here to talk to her. If I felt like that was too far, I could shrink the whole thing down. So you can see here's a radius of 0.1. I could make it like 0.6 or something like that. And I don't want, you should still be able to talk to her if you're over here. So maybe we need to move it a little bit back, like 0.75, something like that might be okay. But anyway, you see how you can play with it and find what you like. So let's just test it. So if I move my player, in theory, if I move my player in that sphere, I should be able to talk to her, I think. And you can see it says press spacebar to interact. You can see that I'm like seeing inside of Remy's brain while I talk to her. I don't know the best way to fix that, really. I guess what I could do, the easy thing to do, would just move the trigger back so you have to be a little farther away from her, or just adjust the default camera angles in Cinemachine. This one is a close-up, I believe. I can't remember. I think we'd have to find this conversation and look at its sequence to see what this camera angle is, but we could adjust it so it's a little closer to her. Or we could figure out how to write some code that like turns his model off when he is not the subject of the camera. But that's probably a little too involved. So I would see if you can just massage the position of stuff to get the effect you want, because we're pretty close. His idle animation is like waving him into the camera view, so it's pretty close. So I guess, the easiest way to maybe get this to work would be to just move that sphere collider on her a little bit farther away. So go back to like 0.8 or even farther. And again, the drawback here is if the player was like standing here, it wouldn't work, which might seem confusing. So this is not by any stretch the perfect solution in my mind. So you just need to find to me, it's a bigger deal that the game seems to work for the player. So make sure you're picking a size that actually is usable before you get too stressed out about seeing the inside of Remy's head and having the camera clip in there. And again, remember, you can adjust the camera angles that are being used here. All right, so that's working. I guess the last thing you might notice is I can walk right through her, but I cannot walk right through Private Heart. I'll just show you what I mean. So I've got that trigger detecting, but I can walk right inside of her. But for Private Heart, he has a solid collision, not just a trigger. So I may want to set that up on my other NPC as well. So to do that, so here she is. I have her parent game object selected here. I'm just going to add one more component. This one is going to be called a capsule collider. Not 2D, but 3D. The default with no suffix is 3D, so choose this one. And it doesn't quite understand how big she is, so we're going to have to customize this capsule collider a little bit. We will make the height, well, let's see. We need to make the height a little bigger. So you can move your mouse like to the left of the input field, and you get these little arrows on either side of your mouse cursor. And then at that point, if you click and drag, you can adjust the size, or whatever the number represents, you can adjust it. And since I don't know the right number, this kind of helps. But I can see that it's centered around her feet, so I need to boost it up a little bit. So I'm going to increase the Y. Y is the up and down. So this looks kind of close, I'd say. Let's just hit play and try that. Yeah, that seems okay to me. All right, cool. So it's probably a good time to save, so I can do that. And now, if you are at home, actually, if you're worried you might mess everything up, it's always a good idea to maybe hit save as and go into your scenes and just make a new scene, like my demo scene or something. And that way, if you totally screw up the scene, you can just go back to the one that I made at the beginning, and which was this one, and just double click it and load it. So you can see right now we're in my demo scene, which when I hit save as, just basically made a copy of this original one with a new name. So I can screw this one up all day. This one stays okay. So that's just something I'd recommend you do if you're worried about messing things up. But remember, if you mess it up a ton, you can always just go back to GitHub and re-download the whole thing, or clone it, or revert, or whatever. Okay, so next up, I think we should talk about how to give her her own conversation, I guess. Because remember, right now she's playing the conversation Private Heart. And this is related to what our reference database is. So again, you might want to make your own new database in case you're worried of breaking this one too bad. I guess we can try to figure out how to do that, but Yeah, let's try it. It's been a while. Might as well give it a shot. I believe if we go to Tools, Pixel Crushers, Dialogue System, and we find the maybe this one. Let's see what this does. So the first step is to create a new thingamajig. So I don't know, how do I do that? It won't let me make a new one. I don't know why I can't create new here. Well, anyway, I just closed that. I guess one way we can do it is just go into our assets, and I'm going to make a new folder because we're going to make this dialogue database, and so it's a type of asset. So I'm just going to call it dialogue, and inside of it, I'm going to right click and go to create, and you can see there's a Pixel Crushers. This is the company who makes dialogue system, and then this dialogue system submenu, and you can see dialogue database is a choice, and I hit it, and I guess it's over here. So how do I give it a name? I'm not sure. Let's see what happened. Did it actually? Yeah, it is here. So I guess I just have to click it to rename it. So let's just call it I don't know, sample database. And so if I double click this, it opens this dialog window here. And there's a bunch of stuff we got to set up basically, but you need to watch the tutorials about how to set all this stuff up. We'll see if I can remember it. Well, I'm going to create a new actor. So we have the player, which is Remy. The new actor is going to be Akai. And so I just did that in the actors tab with the plus, but you know, there's tutorials about this. And now I just need to make a conversation. And in order to do that, I can hit this plus button. And you can see by default, it just gets new conversation 1. But we need to name these things better or stuff's going to get crazy. So if you click in the blank space, you can see this is actually the same kind of interface that our animation controller was using. But if I click in blank space over here, in the inspector, I can give it a new name. So I'll just call it Akai 1 or something like that, because maybe she's going to have a lot of conversations. It's between the player and Akai, so you'd want to set that up. I only have 2 characters right now in this dialogue database, so not a lot of options. And I need to then right click, and I'm going to hit create node, and this is going to basically be what Akai says. So we'll just have her say like hello. And you know what, the more I think about this, I'd have to set up a whole UI and all this. I don't really want to do all that. So I have a different idea actually. I'm just going to actually, you can look in the existing tutorials that Pixel Crushers has about how to make your own database, which is probably a good idea. But for now, I'm going to actually just add to this demo one. So sorry about kind of going a while in the wrong direction there, but I just decided this is going to be more work than it's worth right now. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find that other dialogue, the demo dialogue database. So maybe if I search database, there we go. I think this is it. Maybe that's not it. How about this one? Uh-oh, I did something bad. I'm going to pause the video till Visual Studio loads. Alright, so the default one that Pixel Crushers has already made is here. So if you can't find that, it's kind of nested pretty deep. You can just start typing demo database, And there it is. So if I double click this one, this is the one that's already set up. And you can see here's the private heart conversation that's used in the demo. So what I'm going to do is just add a Kai to all this. So that way I don't have to set up a whole new user interface and all that stuff. So I am going to hit plus and make a Kai in here. And I could give her a description or whatever. And you can also, if you click on private heart, you can see we could add, I thought actually he had a portrait. Oh, here it is. So you can add a portrait. If I don't have a portrait, I could just take a screenshot of her face and make that in here. So that's how you get the thing when her dialog pops up, it has her picture. That's how we would get that to work. Creating the actor name here is how we get the correct name to work when you have the interface. You'll see what I mean in a second. So we do need to give her a conversation. So same deal. Instead of changing these existing ones, they're nice to have as examples. I'm going to hit plus. I want to call this Akai1 again. And we're going to right click in empty space, create a node. This is what she's going to say. We'll just have her say something simple like hello. Oops, I hit tabs and that actually entered text. So right where it says dialogue text, I'm just going to test it and have it say hello. And we'll give the player a couple of options. So I'll right click and I'll create a child node, and the blue means it's the player. So you can kind of see, oh, see, this dialogue is messed up. It's not private heart here, so I'm going to click in the empty space, and I need to say that the conversant is actually a Kai. So anyway, now this should be set up to be a Kai talking. The blue one is the player. So the player's choice, we'll let him say, like I'll give him two choices, one that's mean and one that's nice. So we'll say something like, you are ugly. I don't know. And then we'll make another one that's nice. Oops. So I clicked on the parent here, and I'm going to hit create child node. And we'll say this one is you are smart. There we go. And then she should react differently based on what you picked. So we'll create this one. We'll make a child node. It's back to what she's saying. She'll say something mean. And here she will say something nice. The difference between menu text and dialogue text, like you might notice sometimes games like Mass Effect, they'll sort of like summarize the gist of what the response is going to be, and then the actual text is much longer than that. So that's how that works. Like it could be like severe, and then it would have like a very severe dialogue, or it could be like careful, and it would have like a very careful dialogue or something like that. I don't know. All right, so let's click back on her. We've got this conversation made, but remember we copied her dialogue system trigger from private heart. So if you look carefully at it, this is where we would have to set which database it's using. So if you made a new database, you'd have to plug it in there. And here is where we are choosing the conversation in that database that we want to play. So we should see our new conversation here. And I think that's all we got to do to make this work. So I'm going to hit play. And here she is. Oh, it's not saying her name. We'll have to figure that out. It did, this part worked. But we had to make it say her name correctly. So let's see what's going on with that. So if we click on her here, why is it not saying her name? I'm going to pause it. Oh, well, I guess it's just saying whatever the name of that is, which is interesting. But I thought there's a way to make that based on the actor. So I don't know. I guess one thing we can do, I see there's this override name on the usable script, so I don't have to make this the same name as what shows up in the UI. So I could name this Akai and hit play, and I bet it says Akai when I walk up to her, but I did think there was a way to make it say the actor name automatically. But anyway, it's no big deal. This is fine for now. So you can see if I get carefully into her, you can see why getting the right trigger size is important to making the game easy to play. Anyway, now it says Akai because that's what I typed in there. All right, cool. So I guess I can type or test the other path here. It seems to work. Cool. So now the last thing we want to work on is changing Remy's art. Maybe you don't want your game to have this nerdy little kid. So let's see, what am I gonna do? Let's find Mixamo and go to characters. Now in theory, I think there's no character named Idol, so let's clear that out of there. In theory, I think all of these characters can play all these animations. So since I got animations from here, I think we're safe with any of these characters to use as the player character. So I don't know. I could try this thing. Well, I'm gonna pick one where the character isn't holding anything, because my animations aren't holding anything, and that could make that, you know, it's just like a layer of complication I want to avoid. So let's try Elizabeth, and we will see that Elizabeth is here playing the idle animation from the other thing. I don't want I mean, let's see what happens if I hit download here, because I don't really want the that animation anymore, and I'm actually not sure how to clear it out here. Let's see if I can figure it out. If I go back to animations, is there a way to get rid of it? Actually, maybe if I go back to this and hit download, there's a choice for T-pose, right? But I don't see it. So how do we figure this out? How do I get rid of this animation? You would think there would be like some kind of like checkbox to, or like an X to clear it out. I don't really understand. Oh yeah, here we go. Boom. So there was an X. And so I had to go to animations tab and clear it out. I'll just click another one. If I don't want this animation, X. So I just want the T-pose here because I already have animations for this character. And I'm going to say that changing the animations for the player character is probably outside of the scope of this assignment. If you know how to do it, awesome. But if that's the case, you probably don't need to be even watching this to begin with. So instead, we are going to just use the same animations I already have: the run, the sprint, the backup, and the idle. And I'm just going to download this character with no animations, so T-pose, and FBX for Unity, download. And so this character's name is Elizabeth. So I'm going to go into Unity and start making an Elizabeth folder inside of all my stuff. Well, actually, maybe I don't need that. I guess I just need to drag the Elizabeth model in here. So we'll see if this works. This will be interesting. I have not tried this before, but I suspect it'll work. So I'm going to go show in folder. I'm going to go back to Unity, and I'm going to drag the Elizabeth character in here, which is actually just named character 26, evidently, I think. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on here? Yeah, there we go. So I clicked on the model tab, and you can see it's got the same problem. First of all, I'm tempted to rename this to Elizabeth, but I guess I won't, just so it's clear where it came from. Anyway, I'm going to drag this in here and fix the textures. So remember, you have to click on the character. And you know what? Screw it. I am going to rename it Elizabeth because that other name is too crazy. And so I'm going to go to Materials. And I'm going to go to Extract Textures. And I'm going to go into my Assets directory, find my Textures folder. I'm going to make a new folder called Elizabeth. And open it up. Select folder. Let's see if this fixes it. Yeah, I don't think we have the crazy inside out problem that I had with Remy, so that's all I'm gonna do then, I think. So let's actually go look at her textures real quick. This is getting crazy. So when you get like stuff opened too far and it's hard to figure out how to navigate your project, one trick, I believe if you hold Alt and then click that arrow to collapse it, then you re-expand it, you can see everything has been minimized or collapsed, I guess. Whereas if I hold Alt and click it again, it will expand everything, and then this is kind of the nightmare I was dealing with before. So anyway, hold Alt, click it, and that collapsed everything. And now I can find textures really easy. And then here's Elizabeth, and I wanted to check the normal here. So sometimes Unity will give you an error, which I'm frankly surprised I haven't seen. Oh yeah, here it is. It's just on my other monitor. So you can see like the normal maps are these purple images that are meant to take lighting. They explain how lighting data should impact how the model looks in the game engine. And it's how we get a character to like look highly sculpted, or a surface to look highly sculpted without using a ton of polygons. And it needs us to set this texture type to normal map, and it's smart enough to understand that that's what it should be. So whenever you see this, just hit fix now. So sorry if you saw that earlier. Just hit fix now. All right, cool. So now she looks a little better, and what I'm gonna do is see if we can plug her in substitute for this guy. So let's think about how I'm gonna do that. Let's just click on him here. So we have this character set up, and then we have this Remy guy. So I think what we could do is just have her use the Remy animation controller, I think. But there could be more to it, so we'll find out. So let's click on her, and you can see she has no animation controller assigned right now. So if you click this little button, the circle select, I think is what Unity calls it, and it brings up a list of all of the choices you could ever pick. And we are looking for the one that says Remy animation controller. So double click that. And now she has that applied. And so what I think I'm going to do is kind of, let's see the best way to deal with this. I'm trying to decide if I'm trying to decide what's the most efficient way to deal with this. So you can see like Remy is made up of like all of these different pieces. So it's not super simple to just swap out the art in one chunk. Instead, I think, unfortunately, what we might have to do is kind of similar to what we did with our NPC, and that is to like find the components on here that are missing from her and copy and paste them. I think that would be one way to do it. So we'll collapse Remy here. And basically what I'm going to do is I've got her, like I said, I want to rename this Elizabeth. And I'm going to drag her inside of my character setup prefab here. So just like that. But Now you can see her position in the world did not change. So the character setup is here, and she is like way over here. So you can see her position relative to her parent game object. And Remy is at 0, 0, 0. So we need to make sure she is at 0, 0, 0 also. So I'm going to click on Elizabeth and put her at 0, 0, 0. That way the camera is like looking at her and she's not somewhere back here and all offset incorrectly. So let's see what happens if I hit play now. Basically, I expect her to be like stuck in her T-pose. Yeah. And so the way Remy works is his animations are actually moving him around. So it's something called root motion, which can just help animations look better, as opposed to using script to control the speed of the character. The animation is actually moving the character around, and there's like a good Unity tutorial about it, but that's kind of out of the scope of this video. I'm just trying to figure out what's the dirty way of making the art switched. So I'm going to click on Remy and I'm going to start figuring out what I got to change to make her work. So let's give her this rigid body component. So we'll copy component and we'll find Elizabeth and we will paste it in here. And let's find what else we need here. We need the capsule collider, so we'll copy that component and put it on her. Remember, you got to right click on the names to make that work. Let's go back over here. We have the third person character controller script. Just copy component. We'll go back to her, paste that on there as new. Seems to all be set up correctly. Ooh, her collider is not right though. It's because Remy, it had to be scaled down. So let's just fix her collider and make it much smaller. Actually, what we need to do is change the height to like 2 is about right for the height, but now we need to offset the wide to like 1. The reason is because the Remy model, whoever made it, made the scale much larger than what is normal for a Unity. So you can see Remy has been scaled down to 0.5. So when we moved his components to her, they all of a sudden were not being scaled down anymore and they're big. So that's the problem there. Anyway, what else does Remy have that she needs? Dialogue system trigger. So we will copy this component, and you can see what this is doing is when the conversation starts, it is doing some actions, and it's basically turning off the ability for the player to control the character and start new conversations. So anyway, I copied that component. I'm going to go to her and paste it as new. However, we need to adjust some of the things that this script is pointing to. It needs to point to these components on Elizabeth and not on Remy. So this one, if we make this a little bigger, you can read the whole thing. It's the third person character controller, so we needed to turn off the one that's on Elizabeth, which is right here. So we're just going to drag this into here. And then this one, we haven't added this onto her yet, so we have to go to Remy. Maybe that's what's next. Yeah, selector. This is just stuff that you need to make the dialogue system components work correctly. So we'll copy that component. Go over here, paste as new. So now we have the selector. And then that's still not the one. This is proximity selector that we need. So keep going until we find that. Here's another one, dialogue system trigger, but you can see this one is doing stuff on conversation end, and it's turning the stuff back on. So I have to put that on her, and we're going to have to change what it's pointing to also. But I don't want to change what it's pointing to until we have all of the components on her correctly. And here's the last one, this proximity selector. I'm going to expand that and see what's going on with it. This is where we are setting up some color stuff, what buttons do what it says when you walk up to a usable. So we will right click, copy component, go back to Elizabeth, paste as new. Now I think we have everything that we need to plug into these two triggers. So the on conversation end, it needs to have a way to talk to this script. So I'm going to minimize all this stuff and drag this script into here. So now I need the proximity selector in there. I'm done with this one. Collapse it. And I'm going to find the on conversation start dialogue system trigger here and make sure it's expanded. We have the Elizabeth third person controller plugged in correctly, but we need the proximity selector because you can see it's still pointing to the one on Remy. So we're going to drag this proximity selector into there. Now is kind of the moment of truth. Let's see if this Frankenstein setup works. So what I'm going to do is click on Remy here and just uncheck him. So he's still kind of in our game, but he's just turned off. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is not turned off. And let's hit play and see if we get really lucky and it works. Dang, it is not. So something about the animations are not set up correctly for her. So sort of working, she's turning, but she's not playing any of the animations. And remember, it's the animations that are moving her, or moving Remy at least. So that's the thing I got to figure out how to fix real quick. So I guess we'll kind of go through a little bit of debugging. I'm going to look at the animator window here. And I'm going to click on Elizabeth. And again, she should be using this Remy animation controller. If you don't have the animator window, you can get it by hitting Window, Animation, Animator. That's the one we need. And I guess I want to have it somewhere where I can see the game as it's being played. So my game window needs to be visible and this one needs to be visible. So I'm going to hit play and make sure you have Elizabeth selected here. And you can see it thinks she's in her idle pose. And if I hit forward, it tried to transition her to running. And if I let go of forward, it tried to transition her back to idle. So it's sort of working. It's just the animations aren't playing correctly. So this, just looking at this, allowed us to debug a little bit and understand that the animation controller is working. It's just the animations themselves aren't working correctly with this model. Now this is not something I know a ton about, so it's going to take me a little bit of like debugging to figure out exactly how to fix that. It could be something. Oh look, check this out. What if we just hit apply root motion? I wonder if that'll fix it. If it doesn't fix it, I think it's necessary regardless. So now she moves, but she's not playing the animations. So that's cool. And if I hold shift, she should run. All right, well that was part of the problem, but not the only problem, unfortunately. So if you missed that, in her animator, if you were to compare it to Remy, you can see Remy is using apply root motion and she's not. Now, my next question is, does she need like, part of how this all works is you have to make an avatar. And I wonder if she uses the Remy avatar, it will just work. So let's test that. So our two choices, I think, to make this fixed are either set up her avatar correctly, or maybe we can just plug in the Remy avatar. And we'll see. So what I'm going to do is try plugging in the Remy avatar first of all. So I've got Elizabeth selected here, and this could really go bad. We'll see. So you might want to save your project or something first. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to click the circle select and just plug in the Remy avatar on Elizabeth and see what happens. It looks like nothing changed. So that's not the way to fix it. Let's go back to Elizabeth. And I hope I don't have to go in and download all these animations over again. That would be annoying. Let's look at one of them. Like, let's just look at idle. So in theory, that's not what I wanted to do. I have to find that. So it's Remy at idle. So go into assets, animations, Remy, and here's the Remy idle animation. And let's look at the animation here, and let's see what happens. Like, let's see what happens if I drag what's her name's model in there. Let's just see. If I hit play, it does not work. So this is, I suppose, an accurate preview of what we see in the game. Why is it not working? And can I figure this out? So what happens if I go back to Elizabeth, the Elizabeth model, and we can try to maybe set up her rig correctly. And so one thing I'm going to do is change the animation type from generic to humanoid. And then I'm going to hit apply. And I don't suppose that fixes anything. Let's go back to the Remy at idle here. Look at the animation. Oh, look. Check that out. That might have fixed it. So let's hit play. And idle's working, run is working, walking backwards is working, and sprint is working. Great. So that's all I had to do. So let's see if we can recap that in case you missed it. So what I had to do was find my new character, which was Elizabeth. So assets, models, Elizabeth. And on her rig, I had to change her to humanoid. Additionally, I had to make sure that use root motion was checked on her avatar here. And I think that was all I needed to do. She's actually still using her own Elizabeth avatar. So I did not wind up plugging in the Remy avatar there. And let's just test something. Like if I uncheck Elizabeth here and I turn back on Remy and I run the game, I think he'll still work. Yeah. Neat. Okay, so that is the process. I'm going to turn it back off and turn Elizabeth back on. So Remy off, Elizabeth on. And let's just try talking to the character. That's the last thing we haven't tested so far. So I'm going to go over here I'm going to walk up to Akai and hit spacebar. So it's working, but the camera isn't working. What's up with that? That's concerning. Let's check this one. See if I can fit through here. That camera worked. So it is working. I guess the problem is that our script, I guess, is not on this new conversation, our sequence rather. So remember, if you were to go into let's check out the private heart conversation, and you look at the first node here, it has this sequence about camera close-up or whatever. And if I were to look at Akai, she does not have that sequence. So that's why the camera wasn't changing. So we could try going to private heart and clicking on this first node. We need to intercept blah, 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 blah. And I'm just going to copy this sequence that essentially just has a camera close-up, just to test stuff a little more. I'm going to go back to Akai 1, and I'm going to paste that sequence in for this hello dialog box. And I'm going to run it and see if my camera works. Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. So I'm going to leave it at that, and hopefully this video is helpful. I'll try to find a handful of tutorials that I think are going to be useful if you want to learn more about this stuff. And if you have questions, you know how to get a hold of me. All right. Thanks.